What's good, everybody? I'm Jędrek, he's Sodek, and today we'll be sharing with you the most interesting cards, in our opinion, from Brothers War for Modern and Pioneer. Let's go! Alrighty, so in the previous sets, we've had two different lists, one for Modern, one for Pioneer. We've had like our top 5 or top 10 or whatnot. But this time we decided that that's not the best way to approach those things. And instead, we will just be talking about all the cards that we find interesting. And instead of like dividing them to formats, we will be talking about any card that's like interesting in either of those formats, and if it's interesting in both of those formats, this way we only will be talking about it once, not twice as we used to, which will save us some time and will be more clear, I think, in general. In the timestamp section of the video on YouTube, there will be some indicators whether the card we are talking about currently is suited for Modern, Pioneer, or both. And those indications will be P for Pioneer, M for Modern, which is pretty straightforward. So if you are just scrolling through this video and you don't want to sit through all of it, you can just jump to whatever card you want to hear about, and you can instantly check whether it's in the format that you care about, for the sake of your convenience. So first of all, we are going to talk about cards for both Modern and Pioneer. We have 3 cards that we think that can be significant in both of those formats to some extent. And before we even start talking about cards, I think it's somewhat important to say that while I think Brothers War is a fairly impactful set for Pioneer, there aren't many cards for Modern. And we will be starting with the most impactful card, at least in my eyes, for Modern. And by the looks of this card, you will piece that yourself as well, that it's not the most exciting and flashy set, I think. So without any further ado, the first card, and in my opinion, once again, the most impactful card for Modern from Brothers War is Haywire Mite, which is a 1-mana artifact creature insect for colorless. It's 1/1. When it dies, you gain 2 life, and it has an activated ability. Green, sacrifice Haywire Mite, exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. So it's a variation on a fairly stock, fairly traditional effect in Magic at this point. In various both like toolboxy creature decks and artifact decks and green decks and whatnot, which is a silver bullet you can pick to destroy an enchantment or an artifact. What Haywire Mite does better than any of the predecessors, 2 most important things. The most important thing compared to the card that used to be played like in the Yawgmoth, which is Outland Liberator, that you don't have to track day and night anymore, which is like super annoying in paper. Yeah. And I love that we don't have to do that anymore. And then second most, like, it's obviously the most important thing, but day and night stuff is miserable. I've been playing a bunch of Pioneer recently, and it's such a hassle to track on paper. And the fact that both people are responsible for that, right? Like, I don't have to track. I don't want to track that. I'm not playing those cards in my deck. Like, why do I have to do that? It's just so stupid. Yeah. So, Haywire Mite is an artifact which costs 1 generic mana, which means it's one of the 2 casting costs that can be found with Urza's Saga. It's either a Cheerio or a stick. 1 or 0. And this will be the card that I think will be paired with Urza's Saga in various configurations. Either you will tutor it up to destroy opponent's Erzas Saga, or you will use it with your own Erzas Saga to maybe destroy your opponent's Erzas Saga. I think the deck that the Erzas Saga deck that will see or that will use this card the most is Amulet. I think it's Amulet is the only Erzas Saga deck with green that I can recall right now. Some versions of Breach are playing green, but for example, I don't think that Hammer will have green mana. Like you do have Springleaf Jam, okay, but Springleaf Jam alone is not enough. But yeah,
you would have to build the whole deck, the whole splash effect. And I think that while this card is very powerful, I still think that blue and spell is just better.
Yeah, I think as far as Erzas Saga goes, the most important deck out of Erzas Saga's decks for this card will be Amulet, and then we have the other side of the coin, which are creature toolbox deck that will care about the fact that it's a creature, not the fact that it's artifact. And first one that comes up to my mind when I'm thinking about modern and green creature toolbox decks right now is, of course, Yawgmoth. And it has a bunch of upsides in Yawgmoth. First of all, it costs 1 mana, which is less than 2. Second of all, it's an insect. And you can get a tiny bit of value sometimes when you have Grist and you mill it over. It's an insect. You will get another token and another loyalty counter. It's minuscule, but it can matter from time to time. Also, the fact that when it dies, you gain 2 life in a deck that operates on life total deltas most of the time, like Yawgmoth. Gaining 2 life means you can draw 2 more cards when you are comboing. So it's also a big deal. There is a downside, of course, because you can't destroy artifact creatures with the card. And I guess enchantment creatures, if anybody has them, like Eidolon of Great Revel, I guess. But you won't sideboard it against burn.
Guy?
Oh, Enchantress is not a deck really, let's be real.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, overall, it's a pretty solid upgrade in my opinion. And do you have anything to add, Sodek, about Haywire Mite?
2 things. First is the Exile ability, and Exile deals with undestructible things, and one of the biggest problem for Yawgmoth especially was Kaldra complete, and this card answers this clearly, and that's in my opinion a huge upgrade, because the only way Yawgmoth was losing Hammer matchup, it was because fast Kaldra was taking over the game. And the second thing is that it can be a good Karn target for your wish boards because it's cheaper, so you can deploy it earlier. I still don't know if it will be good enough to see play, but maybe it's a tutorable answer to Blood Moon, for example, if you are playing a Tron and you go for the Karn. So maybe there's something. Overall, the card is quite good, and it will see a ton of play. It's just a strictly better option than anything else we had.
It's not a strictly better option, I would say.
Because
of the fact that it can't kill creatures, like in some meta games when you are faced, or in some decks when you are faced with a very annoying, I can imagine a deck that has this type of effect that really wants to get something like Esper Sentinel or Eidolon of Rhetoric or Eidolon of Great Revel of that bot, and you can't with it. So
okay, so
in most cases it will be an upgrade, definitely. Yes, okay, next up we have another card that falls into similar criteria, kinda, but I'm not actually sure whether it's an upgrade, or rather copies 5 to 8. It's third path Iconoclast. It's 1 red and 1 blue for a 2/1 human monk, and it has an ability whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. So this card is very reminiscent of Young Pyromancer, of course, and there are many notable downsides and upsides to third path Iconoclast. The most important downside of third path Iconoclast is that it's a multicolor blue-red card, which on the surface level makes it a bit harder to cast, which usually won't be the case compared to Young Pyromancer, because if you are playing a blue-red deck, then you kinda rarely have more than one non-blue producing land. But in Pioneer, when your mana base are terrible, from time to time, you will have this situation in which like you had to put your Lava Glide pathway on the red side, and then you maybe draw Spikefield Hazard as your additional land, and then you can't tap both of them to cast this card. But the more important part of why being a blue is a downside is that you can counter this card with Mystical Dispute and kill it with Rending Volley. And those two sideboard cards are quite common in Pioneer. And I think those two cards are the big reason why most decks that play Pyromancer currently in Pioneer, like Phoenix, won't play this card over Pyromancer. Because I think if you have like one or two non-creature spells that aren't instants or sorceries in your deck, it's not worth it to play Iconoclast over Pyromancer. Where I think Iconoclast will shine, if it will shine at all, are decks that, first of all, care deeply about the fact that it triggers off of artifacts, and they also care about the fact that the tokens you get are artifacts. So decks that play in Modern, it's Urza's Saga. In Pioneer, there are various cards that benefit from artifacts hitting the battlefield as well. So definitely this part of the card, I think, will be relevant in most cases where this C plays over Pyromancer. This in Pioneer. I think in Modern it's not that big of a deal because nobody plays Rending Volley, and there are already so many good targets for Mystical Disputes in those decks that like it's less important. Because I think the biggest issue with this card in Pioneer is that Young Pyromancer out of Phoenix is a card that you really want, for example, against Blue-White. And when Blue-White has their Rest in Peace with Mystical Dispute draw, and you have Young Pyromancer, you can just play Pyromancer and they can't dispute it. And if you have Iconoclast and they dispute it, you are very, very sad. There are other notable upgrades and or downgrades to Iconoclast in comparison with Pyromancer regarding the tokens. They are colorless, which is generally good because, for example, if you're playing against mono white humans, they can't use Brave the Elements to give their creatures effective unblockability against a swarm of your tokens. They are artifacts which are in general downside if you don't care about them being an artifact yourself as a deck. There is a card from Brotherhood that we'll talk about later called Brotherhood's End. It's a sweeper that has a mode of destroy each artifact with converted mana cost 3 or less. And if you're playing a blue-red deck and you have this sweeper against an aggressive deck that, for example, have unlicensed hearts and they want to kill unlicensed hearts from time to time, if you have this instead of Pyromancer, sometimes you will kill your tokens and it won't be very good. It's a minor downside, but it's something that's quite likely to happen at some point. So in general, my verdict on third path Iconoclast is that it's a card that will mostly see play over Young Pyromancer in decks that really care about artifacts, and there will definitely be some decks that wanted more than 4 Young Pyromancers, and now you get to play 8 Young Pyromancers if you want, and I think that's a pretty big deal for those type of artifacts. It's even matches up well with Of One Mind, just like Pyromancer, because it's a human and it creates non-humans, so you get to play the curve of Token Maker of One Mind for 1 mana. So definitely an interesting card that will see some amount of play.
Yeah, like you asked basically everything I wanted to say. The only thing I wanted to point out is that maybe this will be a sideboard option in bridge decks in Modern, But once you said about the mana cost, I was thinking about it, that maybe it will be problematic with Urza's Saga to cast, so maybe it's not that good. But triggering from Mox Amber, from Mishra's Bubble, from repeating Mishra's Bubble from with Emery, maybe there's something that will help you play a mid-range game versus like post sideboard when the opponent has hate for your combo kills.
Yeah, I can see it. For example, like some people were playing Pyromancer in Murktide. I think it's better in Murktide because you don't have non-blue lands in Murktide unless you like Blood Moon yourself. So you are not usually bottlenecked on blue mana in that deck. And Iconoclast with Mishra's Bubble is poor man's Pyromancer with Gitax and Probe, which used to be pretty great. This is definitely worse because, of course, Bubble is a worse card than Gitax and Probe. Let's not kid ourselves. But yeah, overall, I think that it will see some play. And last card we have for Modern Pioneers, a card that Sodek suggested. And first I will read what it does, and then Sodek will have the chance to share his thoughts with you on this card. It's called Overwhelming Remorse. It's a 4 and a black, so 5 mana total instant. It costs 1 less for each creature card in your graveyard, and it exiles target creature or planeswalker. So it's sort of like Murderous Cat esque card. So Sodek, what do you think about it, and when or where it will be good?
Yeah, like the card looks quite tricky, and there are like numerous things that has to happen to make this card good. In my opinion, it will be the best in maybe differently. The only way I can see this being playable in Modern is Living End, because you can cycle creatures into graveyard and then cast it for 1 mana to, for example, kill Teferi and Cascade on the same turn, or exile another hide bear we want to exile. So that's kind of cool. Maybe there's some like fringe strategies with like Vengevine, Crabvine stuff. Maybe there's something there, but I'm not sure. In terms of Pioneer, it's a bit harder for me to find a deck that will use it 100%. Maybe some form of sacrifice decks can make a good use of it. It's also an exile, so it's an effect that's quite good in Pioneer because of MG 5 mana Cavalier of
Thorns.
Yeah, like Green Cavalier. So maybe it will see play in like sacrifice shells. We'll see.
I think in Sacrifice we already have this card that costs 1 mana if you sacrifice a creature to it, and it exiles creature or planeswalker. I think it's called Eaten Alive, something like that.
Yeah, Eaten Alive, yeah. So this is a tiny upgrade, but
is it an upgrade? Like you can cast it early, and when you don't have like 4 creatures in the yard.
Yeah, but there are some situations when you don't want to sacrifice stuff.
Oh, of course.
It's an instant content compared to sorcery speed. Eaten Alive, or maybe Eaten Alive was also an instant.
It's a sorcery. Eaten Alive is sorcery, I think.
Okay,
so like I think it's more fit to decks like Greasefang and Pioneer. I think decks that like have some self mill. You put creatures into your graveyard anyways, and you didn't have like sacrifice fodder. Like you didn't sacrifice, or you sometimes you have like a Satyr lying around, but it's not so free to have this. You don't always have like Cauldron Familiar or a token or whatever.
Yeah. Like it will be much harder to have 4 creatures in the graveyard to have this for 1 mana.
Yeah, but it's good for 2 mana as well, right? And it's like possible for free.
Like I would like to play it for 1 mana, but I think that Greasefang will play more creatures moving forward, and we'll get to that later, I guess.
That's probably the case. Okay, so moving forward to things that are always only will be making waves, at least in Sodek's opinion, in Modern. We have ARcane Proxy, which is a 7 mana artifact, also a creature with wizard subtype. It has the new prototype mechanic, which is you may cast the spell with different mana cost, color, and size. It keeps its abilities and types. So you can cast it as a 3 mana, 1 and 2 blue, 2/1 artifact creature wizard. And its original power and toughness is for free if you paid for 7 mana. And it has a triggered ability. When Arcane Proxy enters the battlefield, if you cast it, exile target instant or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to Arcane Proxy's power from your graveyard. Copy that spell. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So it's basically like a Snapcaster Mage-esque type of card. And I think Sodek has a home for it in Modern, which I very much doubt that it will show up in, but who knows? Sodek.
In my opinion, the most important part is that you can cast cards that doesn't have any costs, because you copy this card, you may cast the copy. Is that that's the reason, I guess. So you can cast cards like Crushing Footfalls. So in my opinion, there's a chance that this could be used as just yet another Shardless Agent in Rhinos. So you cast Shardless Agent, resolve or not your Crushing Footfalls, then play this one, get a 2/1 guy, and a pair of Rhinos as well. There are some other spells you can try to flashback. You can try to flashback Express Iteration, but it's quite hard to get because of the mana costs of the cards, or like something for 1 mana. But overall, like if I'm thinking about Arcane Proxy, I'm thinking mostly about Crushing Footfalls, because like it won't be that good in Living Hand, because you generally speaking you want to cycle, then protect the queen. By the queen I mean your 1 living hand that you want to resolve. And maybe in like heavy attrition battles, when you like trying to like play living hand after living hand until 1 resolves, maybe that will be the thing. But I'm mainly thinking about Rhinos, not living hand, but we'll see.
Okay, so yeah, my biggest worry when it comes to Arcane Proxy is that usually when you get your first Crushing Footfalls in the game, you are in a pretty good spot, or at least that's what I've been told by Arceus Dota, that you usually lose if you don't draw any Cascaders at all. And this doesn't help you when you don't draw any of them. And for the most part, Rhinos have been playing Ley Lion's Binding, so they can play Ardent Plea and have more than 8 Cascades. And I can't see this card being better than Ardent Plea for the most part. Maybe if you are playing the 3-color Rhino build, the more traditional one, you can use it then. But also you can't pitch it to Force of Negation, which is a fairly sizable downside, I think. Where I can see this card being okay, I guess, is actually Pioneer. In some sort of creature deck with some important spells, but a deck that cares about creatures getting on the board. So the best comparison I have for a deck in general is like Banned Company from Standard, where you had a bunch of creatures, but you also had Jayzerin's Prodigy that could flashback Company. So you had a spell that you cared about, but you also cared about having creatures on the board and creating traction. I'm not saying you want to play it with Company, because first of all, it can't get hit by Company, it can't recast Company, yada yada yada. But this type of deck, like for example, if you are playing some like tempo-y or mid-range deck, and I don't know, you kill something and contribute to the board for 3 mana. Like I can see it being good in that type of deck.
Like I can see people trying it like blue-black mid-range in Pioneer, and like after 2 weeks I will came to conclusion that red-black is just better.
It might be. So. It honestly might be the same deck as Iconoclast with like a bunch of artifacts. Maybe you just you create some artifact tokens. Maybe even the 8 Pyromancers deck. Like it creates another body. It flashes back a spell. But in any deck that can play Treasure Cruise, Founding the Third Path is probably much better. But in general, I'm not super hyped about ARcane Proxy, but we'll see. Okay. Last modern candidate from new set that we have is Mishra's Research Disc, which is a 1-mana artifact that has an activated ability for 1 and a tap. Sacrifice Mishra's Research Desk, not disc. My mistake. Exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one of them until end of your next turn. You may play that card. So an effect familiar to most players from cards like Unlucky Witness, for example. And it has a nerf for 1 and a red. So it's, in my opinion, the card that will mostly show in decks with Urza's Saga that can produce red mana. For example, Crusherbot Zuagra or Crusherbot BG top 8 the challenge this past Sunday with mono red artifacts deck with like Cranial Plating and Shrapnel Blast and Urza's Saga among other cards. So in those type of like a bit more like artifact centric red decks with Urza's Saga, I think this card will be pretty good. It can also be recast with Emry in like Breach. So I don't know. It's one of those cards that looks kind of unassuming, but it has potential. So
yeah, like even without like Emry, you can still nerf it and get card advantage going. So like you should always keep these cards in mind that they are there.
Okay, moving on to Pioneer.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I bamboozled Solek because we have a second card that we will talk about on the screen. Because the first card that I want to talk about is a card that I know by heart at this point, and I think it's the most impactful card for Pioneer from new set, or at least from my skewed blue-red perspective. And it's Brotherhood's End. It's a sweeper for 3 mana, 1 colorless, 2 red, and it has 2 modes. You choose one of them. First is Brotherhood's End deals 3 damage to each creature and planeswalker, and the second one is destroy each artifact with CMC 3 or less. So it's a sweeper that can also kill Unlicensed Hearse, which is
another Gravehate, yeah.
But Unlicensed Hearse is the most common. It's a fairly big deal because you wanted to have enough answers density against Unlicensed Hearse. So you wanted to play. I've played as many as 4 Abrades in various blue-red decks because you do want to get rid of Unlicensed Hearse. And now you can play. You can combine your sweeper slots and some of your Abrade slots into one card, which is super important. And also, sweepers are like 3 mana deal 3 sweepers are really good against red-black because sometimes if they go Blood-type Harvester into Graveyard Trespasser and you kill 2 creatures worth 5 mana with 1 sweeper, like they are super far behind and they can't ever win. And now you have but sometimes they have like Shieldred and Unlicensed Hearse, and your sweeper doesn't do anything. And now at least it can kill Unlicensed Hearse. So I think that it will be a pretty big deal for any blue-red deck in Pioneer. Anything you want to add about Brotherhood's End?
Like you said everything I wanted to say.
I guess one more thing is that I can see it being okay in Murktide, in Modern, because it's really good against Hammer Time. I think that the destroy each cheap artifact is a pretty great side of the sweeper against Hammer Time. I think it's really good there. It costs 2 red, which is not that big of a deal, but sometimes can come up. The deal 3 damage side, I guess, can be somewhat relevant against like people are playing Zoo nowadays. It's okay against like Yawgmoth. Sometimes like their Grease will minus on your Murktide using an Undying Creature, and then you will kill the second half of Undying Creature and Grease at the same time. So like I think it has a chance of being okay in Murktide, but we'll see. Okay. Moving on to our second card for Pioneer, which is Geek's Yawgmoth Praetor, which is 3 mana, 1 colorless and double black for a 3/3 legendary creature Phyrexian Praetor with a triggered ability. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card, which is a pretty good ability. Like,
Okay, to be exact, I have 3 creatures. I attack with all of them.
you
All
can
of them deals
pay up to
damage. I
3
can go
life and
free-
draw. Yes.
Okay, so like I wasn't sure if it works this way because it looked OP, but
It works like that, and it's the old way of designing cards. And I was quite surprised that there is this wording on it, because usually it was, I guess we are saved by commander here, because it's the wording for commander. With the its controller does a card, so you couldn't have the more traditional wording these days, which is whenever one or more creatures you control deals damage, or something like this ability only trigger one each turn, something like that. So it's one of those cards that I can see being good in red-black. When you play 2-drop into this 3-drop and then you draw a card after you attack. It also has an activated ability for 7 mana, including 3 black. Discard X cards, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library. You may play land and cast spells from among cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. Which I can see, I don't know, coming up in a very long game against like green when you cast a bunch of big dum-dums. But in general, it's a 3 mana 3/3 that will draw a card whenever a creature connects, which I think can help the aggro draws of red-black, which from my experience with Pioneer are the most impressive draws that red-black has. Basically a 2-drop into 3-drop, and you Thoughtseize on one, or you play Fatal Push or whatever, and then you actually gain enough traction to just kill your opponent. So yeah.
Okay, what do you think? What do you think about this card in mono black aggro? Like low to the ground, a lot of 1-drops.
It's
this
probably
can be a reason.
Yeah.
This can be a reason to play this deck. Yeah?
It's probably in any black deck that wants to play a creature on turn 1 or turn 2, I think is a pretty decent card. And it gets me to our next card on the list, which is Misery's Shadow, which is the newest variation on Nentuko Husk, which is a 2 mana 2/2. It has a static ability of if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead, which is an ability known from, for example, Kalitas, which makes it a pretty solid card against mono green, because then you get rid of Trolls and Cavalry of Thorns. And it has an activate ability for colorless. 1 colorless Misery's Shadow gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And red-black...
It will be a nightmare to block it, really.
Yep. Like, red-black plays some, I guess, questionable 2-drops from time to time, like people play Tenacious Underdog, stuff like that. And Misery's Shadow is a pretty solid upgrade, I think, to those cards in general. Like, you play this one Tenacious Underdog, which of course has some value from the graveyard, but this has a relevant line of text, which is like, this line of text is actually pretty huge against mono green. Like, it's why you want Kalitas against mono green, why Kalitas is a good card, because you get to exile their stuff with removal spells, Trolls and Cavaliers.
Trolls is the most important.
Yeah, Trolls and Cavaliers. So this is a 2-drop that can do that, and of course, and also against mono green, you kind of want to be as aggressive as possible to kill them. So you want to go like interaction into 2-drop into more interaction. Like, if you play those on 2, they play Troll, you kill Troll, you attack for 2 or possibly more, because like it's pretty great at being mana efficient as well. Like, for example, if your turn 3 removal for Troll is Dreadbore, you can Dreadbore it and use your once per mana to pump this and attack for free. Or if you use Fatal Push off of Treasure or something, you can attack for 4 or 5 or whatever. So I think it will be like, if you're in the need for more 2-drops in red-black, or you aforementioned mono-black aggro maybe, I think it's a pretty decent card to have.
Very good. It's also a great way to win a top deck war, because like it's a 2-drop that's good on turn 2, but when it's turn 10 or turn 15, whatever, you play this guy and you threaten lethal all the time. You attack, force the opponent to block like crazy, and then you just maybe do nothing and get value elsewhere. It will also be quite good versus red-black sacrifice decks. because it will stop Crowd Familiar.
Yeah, it's also a 2-drop that will be good against Phoenix, right? You play
Yes.
it and then you kill Phoenix and it's gone for good. So overall, a pretty good 2-drop for red black, I think. Next up, we have another 2-drop. That one is not an homage like Misery's Shadow was to Nantuko Husk? No, Nantuko Husk. Nantuko Shade. This one is an actual reprint. It's Fauna Shaman. It's 1 colorless, 1 green for a 2/2 elf shaman with an activate ability of green, tap, discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And Fauna Shaman is a card that has seen a fair amount of success in Constructed about 10 years ago. So it's been quite a while. But it's also the first time since then that it's legal in a format that's less powerful than Modern. So maybe we can see some people trying to build like, I don't know, some sort of... It can be good in various, I think, creature decks. It can maybe be good in elves. I can see it being okay in people... Like people tried elves. I think it can be pretty okay at like discarding your Elvish Mystics and finding, however it's called. Shaman of the Pack, yes. It might be okay in like some builds of Greasefang, some builds of Sacrifice. I can see a bunch of decks that like has early creatures that it kinda needs to work, like stuff like Satyr Wayfinder or like Elvish Mystic or something like that. And does Jan's Citadel plays Elvish Mystic? Probably, right?
Yes.
Some amount.
Yes.
So like any deck that has mana dorks early on, but also has some things like Mayhem Devil or I don't know, like Greasefang or Shaman of the Pack that you don't mind upgrading it to that better card later on in the game. I think it's not like super good card on raid, but I can see it being okay as a couple copies in some sort of like creature decks in general.
Yeah, there's also a chance to build some form of chains to search for something that will return later on, but that's quite slow, and it worked quite well with Vengevine because Vengevine was a good card by its own and its times. Nowadays I don't see this type of effect because like we have Silver Smoke Ghoul, Priced Amalgam, this type of stuff, but we don't have anything better than that. Maybe searching for something that has escape or an Earth will be an option, but like it's hard to get for me. Overall, the card is strong.
Yeah, I
and
guess you can also search up Venifer with it to gain a bit more redundancy in those kind of decks that people like.
Kinda, but on the other hand, it's kinda slow because you need to play Fauna Shaman, then wait to untap with it, then search for it, and have mana.
Yeah, it's like it just makes turn 4 Vanifer more reliable, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Because you turn 2 you play Shaman, turn 3 you search for Vanifer and play 2-drop, turn 4 you play Vanifer. Okay.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Evangel of Synthesis, which is a blue-black, so 2 mana for a 2/3 Phyrexian human cleric. And when it enters the battlefield, draw a card and discard a card. So more or less connive. The only difference is that you don't put a counter on it. And it has a static that as long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, Evangel of Synthesis gets +1/+0 and has menace. So I've seen Canister losing to Esper Greasefang on stream somewhat recently. And if you're going for this variant of Greasefang, I think this card is a pretty good upgrade over Raffine's Informant, or just more copies of Raffine's Informant. Like Raffine's Informant will be more copies of this. I think if you want to play 6, you will play 4 of these and then 2 Informants. I think it's a better card than Informant. That's what I'm getting into. Unless your mana has a bunch of mono-white sources for some reason, but I don't think that will be the case.
I feel that this card is quite good in Esper Greasefang because you already play like Opts and Considers, so it's relatively easy to make this 3/3 menace. So your mid-range plan when your combo, like you can like discard Parhelion, then opponent needs to keep mana open all the time, and you just keep playing cantrips and other guys and attack. And this strategy is probably one of the most effective post sideboard when you really don't attempt to combo, but threaten all the time.
Yes.
And
you can also play like Ledger Shredder in this deck, so you'll draw
Yes, of
cards.
course.
I know the list that Canister faced had Raffine, so you can play it with Raffine as well. And Raffine in general loves having a 2-drop to attack with, because if you go turn to Evangel, turn 3 Raffine, attack with this, it will connive, and if you put counter on it, it will be a 4/4 attacker on turn 2 on turn 3, which is a fairly sizable threat.
3/3.
4/4, because if you connive and non-land, you will get a counter on it. You play it on 2, then on 3 you play Raffine. Raffine has whenever you attack, target attacking creature connives. So
Raffine,
this one will
okay,
connive. Yeah.
I was thinking about other card. Okay, sure.
Yeah. So I can see it being a good card in Aspergill's Fang should that become a reasonable deck. Next up, we have a fairly boring addition to Pioneer, which are new Painlands. We've got 4 Painlands in Brothers War, but 2 of those are way more important than the rest, because Underground River and Brushland enters Pioneer for the first time. And so far, we've seen a good deal of, I think mostly Karplusan Forest, seeing a bunch of play in, I guess Sulphurous Springs shows up in red-black as well. But both Sulphurous Spring and Karplusan Forest, and I guess a Darker Oasis shows up in Spirit as well. So I think Painlands are, of course, not as good as Fastlands, for example, but there is like a good amount of presence in those allied color pairs for Fastlands. And I think they will see play. Nothing more to add.
Good
really.
lands are good.
Yep.
Move on. Like I feel we don't have one card on our list, and I would like to mention it now. Okay.
What card is it?
Diabolic Intent.
Oh yeah. Like
about
it was there, and then I mistakenly took it out. But yeah, so we'll talk about Diabolic Intent after we're done with Teferi Temporal Pilgrim, because I already looked that up. It's a 5 mana planeswalker, 3 colorless, double blue. It's Teferi, as I already mentioned. Start with 4 loyalty. It has a static ability, but not as infuriating as Teferi's Time Raveler's static ability. It says whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. It has a 0 mana ability, which is technically a 0 mana, but in reality it puts a counter on it, so it's kind of like +1. It's draw a card, then it has -2. Create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. And -12. Target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hand. Then they shuffle each non permanent they control into its owner's library. So basically, it's another sort of you cast spells, you draw cards, and then you win prizes type of card. Something like, I don't know, Piece of the Puzzle is this type of card. Treasure Cruise is the payoff for this type of strategy. And we've tested it in Phoenix yesterday a bit. I don't think that things that cannot be found with Pieces of the Puzzle are that great in Phoenix. So I would rather not include it in my list, I think. There are other blue-red decks that do not play Pieces of the Puzzle. I think that the blue-red Founding, the third path deck that I've played a while ago, would rather play Jace. But if you want, for some reason, more Planeswalkers, more like heavy hitters against red-black, I can definitely see this card being okay. Like, it protects itself pretty well. Like, it effectively starts on 5 counters. Like it starts on 4, then it goes to 5. So technically, if you have a 4 mana instant way, like a 4 damage instant speed removal spell, you will kill it because it's not drawing a card, like putting a counter on it is not a part of the cost. It's a trigger after you actually resolve the ability. But like, it's not super, like this card can ultimate the turn after it enters. It's not super likely for it to happen, but it can quite easily, I guess. Like it's on 4, it goes to 5, then you draw a card for your turn, it goes to 6, you cast Treasure Cruise, it goes to 9, and then you just cast a bunch of cantrips and it can go to 12 on the next turn. Somewhat easily.
Or just go Galvanic Iteration, Treasure Cruise.
Or Galvanic Iteration, Treasure Cruise. If you have Ledger Shredder, it will connive and you will draw and you will put counters. Like, I think it's a pretty... I think this card will mostly be used to make tokens. Like, it will be a card that you play, you may be drawn the first turn to ensure its survival, and then you just like -2 make a token that will be 5/5 in a second, and then you make another token. So basically, I think it's a pretty good card for Treasure Cruise decks in Modern that aren't Phoenix.
Pioneer.
Or in Pioneer, rather, yeah. Oh, Treasure Cruise in Modern. Those were the times. But
I think like killing it will be a nightmare if you are a damage-based deck.
The most common removal for Planeswalker these days is Dreadbore, so...
Yeah, like
killing it in combat will be very, very hard. That's definitely the case. And yeah, I think it will be at its best at like just creating 2 or 3 sizable attackers. But yeah, once again, I don't think that cards that can be found with Treasure Cruise or with pieces of the puzzle, unless they cost like 2 mana or 3 mana or something, like we've tried various 5 drops in Phoenix like this, like Vance's Blasting Cannons, like Keranos, and all of those cards are kind of clunky, and then if you play pieces of the puzzle and you miss, you feel really, really bad. So, yep. I think this card has a bunch of potential, and I think it will be probably okay in some deck in Pioneer at some point, but I don't have like an immediate home for it. All right. So now to, I think, the card that some people are the most interested in the set, which is a Diabolic Intent. It's a 2 mana sorcery as an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a creature, and then it's a demonic tutor. Basically, you search your library for a card and you put it into your hand in the shuffle. So I know that many people were saying that this card is insane after it gets spoiled in Greasefang, which, like, I don't think it's a Greasefang card, really.
No,
like,
not at all.
You already had the Eldritch Evolution. If you want to sacrifice a creature and jump to Greasefang, it costs less mana because Eldritch Evolution actually puts Greasefang in play, and then with Diabolic Intent you have to pay 3 mana, so it's 5 versus 3. But I think this card is pretty great in any deck interested in sacrificing their stuff, so anything with Mayhem Devil, basically. This is Demonic Tutor in Red-Black Sacrifice, basically. This is Demonic Tutor in Red-Black, and I think sacrifice decks, like also, like another reason why Greasefang is not the best example is that in Greasefang you want to tutor a creature, which is something that you already have a pretty good access to with like Traverse the Alvenwald or Eldritch Evolution. Yes, this kind type of effect. And this can get you anything. So it's much more important for decks like Red-Black Sacrifice that would like to get Witch's Oven, or decks like Giant Citadel that would like to get, well, Bolas's Citadel or Collected Company, depending on the situation. Like, I think that most of the time, this will be the card that will shine with Mayhem Devil in the same deck, basically.
I feel like having Mayhem Devil in the deck is, in my opinion, quite good, but it's not the end of the story. Like, you want to sacrifice something that costs very little, or like it's a token added to your creature you play. For example, if you play Catacomb Sifter, you get a token, and you sacrifice this token. It's not the end of the world. You'll even get a scry. You'll get for the Citadel, and you go off. That's cool. And I feel that the Citadel decks were already in my opinion, playable and underplayed in the format. So I'm curious if this will be something to break. Like, just please don't add it to any creature tag, because like I saw it was probably Doomwake who was theory crafting, the Diabolic Intent elves. And from my perspective, I was testing a lot of elves, and it looked very bad at the surface, because like it's a critical mass deck, and you want your creatures in the battlefield and go very wide and attack through the blockers. So like
It's pretty funny
any
because we already mentioned Fauna Shaman, which is seems like a much better tutor for the deck than Diabolic Intent.
Don't sacrifice your board presence.
Yep. Okay. So verdict is in on Diabolic Intent. It's a card for decks that don't mind sacrificing their creatures, like Sacrifice, or Giant Citadel. Next up, we have a bunch of cards that will be mostly never leaving the sideboard and will be tutored with Karn, the Great Creator. And first of those cards is the Stone Brain, not to confuse it with Brain Stone or Mind Stone, or any other card that references stones and head. It's a 2-mana legendary artifact with an activated ability to tap, exile the Stone Brain, choose a card's name, search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for up to 4 cards with that name, and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. Activate only as a sorcery. And I wonder if they thought specifically about mono green devotion when they designed this card, because it's fairly uncommon for this type of effect to be able to snag basic lands. You can actually find 4 basic lands with it, which usually don't happen because like on surgical extraction and cranial extraction and yada, you don't have the the end cap on how many copies you can find. You can find as many copies as you like. So obviously those can't target basic lands, because then you will just run your opponent out of basic lands with 1 card, and it would be rather silly. But this card can take basic lands 4 at the time, which for the normal use of it is not that relevant, but this card can be a combo piece in the mono green devotion deck, because it exiles itself, so very conveniently you can get it with Karn, and or even if it didn't exile in your combo, you have infinite planeswalker activation. You can just get Tormod Script over and over again. Not important. Yeah. You can just grab it repeatedly with Karn and exile their whole deck, which makes this card a very easy replacement for black source that was in every mono green sideboard, for you to activate Pestilent Cauldron, which is the front side of Restorative Burst, because you want Restorative Burst anyways, because that's a part of your combo. But then you had both your combo and your win condition in 1 card, Restorative Burst / Pestilent Cauldron, but then you had to devote another slot to a way to make black mana. And now instead of making black mana, you can just play Stonebrain, which will just mill them by exiling their whole deck for 4 cards at a time, which will be more click intense on Modo, but in paper it will be virtually the same. And you also will get to, search their hand and see what they have and stuff like that. And
you can also use this card in a fair way.
Yes, that's what I'm getting into. It's an upgrade to this effect, because the black source is only relevant when you combo, and this card can be just used.
I'm not that sure.
99.9% of the time. Okay, Reckoner Bankbuster has its uses, but the black source, the black mana is needed in the deck only to combo. And this card can be used, for example, to, you play against Phoenix, you have 8 mana with Karn, you get their Phoenixes, or you get their Temporal Trespass, which is a very important card in the matchup. Or you are playing against, Lotus Field, and you can get Lotus Field if you want.
If you're lucky enough.
if they don't change how they build their decks, like I think the current iteration of Lotus Field, if you choose Mastermind's Acquisition, they can't win game one. I think the current iterations of Lotus don't have main deck ways to win, and they just have Mastermind's Acquisition. I'm not 100% sure, but that's something that Keinster told me. I don't know how Lotus lists are built, but at the very least, you are forcing them to have like Fae of Wishes as well, or whatever.
Yeah, they usually have one, but you still exile to like 4 cards, so you can just grab Fairy of Wishes. It's not with different names, yes.
They have to have the same name.
Oh, that's rude.
Yeah.
So you can just exile Ultimatum and make them combo much harder.
Yeah, that's true. Once again, you can get maybe Thespian Stage, which also makes it much harder for them to combo if they don't have Thespian Stage. Because like they can't really, with Grazer, they can have Lotus on 2 and Thespian Stage on 3, but in general, they won't have Thespian Stage in play until turn 4. And it's not that hard for Devotion to make 8 mana by turn 4. So if you don't have a kill, then you can just get Karn Brainstone and maybe, or Stonebrain rather, and maybe something will be.
One question: do you think that people will play it as a win con on MTGO in Pioneer Devotion decks?
Depends because on how expert you are at playing Modo, and on how fast your computer is. I think I would. I think I'm pretty good at clicking on Modo, and my computer is fast. But if I wasn't super good at clicking through things on Modo, or if I was playing out of like my laptop or whatever, then I wouldn't play this card probably. Okay. So dexterity issues aside, like Modo issues aside, next up we have Cityscape Leveler, which is another card that can get wished for with Karn, which is an 8 mana, 8/8 with Unearth 8 and Trample. And when you cast the spell and whenever Cityscape Leveler attacks, destroy up to 1 target non-permanent, and its controller creates a tapped Power Stone token. So it's more or less an upgrade to Meteor Golem. I can see one mana more for it being somewhat relevant from time to time, but overall, I think people will play this over Golem, but I think it's close. I think you can definitely make an argument for...
I don't think it's close.
I think it's quite close. Like, I can see the argument of, okay, when you tutor for Meteor Golem, you have Karn and you have a bunch of mana, so usually you will have enough of a board presence, but sometimes this 7 versus 8 mana will actually matter. So... I think there is a chance, I can definitely buy into playing Meteor Golem over this. But I think most people will play Leveler instead. And the last one that we have for Karn is Woodcaller Automaton. It's a card from Brothers War Jumpstart, but I've been told that those cards are legal in Pioneer. Let's talk about it, and if it's not legal in Pioneer for some reason, we'll learn whether it's legal or not in, I don't know, 10 days, whatever.
Sure.
I hope nobody shows up to their last chance with this in their deck if it's not legal or anything like that. But, What's is very good at conveying information and stuff like that. Okay, so it's a 10 mana 8/8 with prototype for 4 mana, including 2 green and 3/3. And when Woodcaller Automaton enters the battlefield, if you cast it, untap target land you control, it becomes a 3/4 creature with haste and base power and toughness equal to Woodcaller's Automaton's power and toughness. It's still a land. So this card can untap Nykthos for 4 mana, and most importantly, or more important, I guess not more importantly, but what's also very nice is that if you cast it with the prototype cost, it actually has 2 green mana symbols in its cost and would actually provide you with 2 devotion.
Yes.
So that's pretty nice, and it's a way for Karn to untap Nykthos. And then to wrap this up, because we've been recording this for more or less an hour, close to. We have a bunch of cards that we just gonna scour through quickly because they are, for the most part, minor upgrades to existing effects in the format. First of all, is Obliterating Bolt. It's Lava Coil, so it's a sorcery for 2 mana. It deals 4 damage to a creature, and if it's exiled, if it dies this turn, it will get exiled. But Obliterating Bolt can also target Planeswalkers. So it's basically Lava Coil that can target Planeswalkers. Then we have Loran of the Third Path. It's a 3 mana, 2/1 legendary creature, human artificer with vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. And you can tap it to make you and target opponent each draw a card. So it's a Reclamation Sage-esque type of card for decks like, I don't know, Incarnation or something like that. Then we have Laydown Arms, which is a 1 mana white sorcery. It exiles target creature with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of planes you control, not basic planes, just planes. And its controller gains 3 life, which if it shows up, it probably will be in mono white humans.
Like that's kind of funny because like it looks like a super powerful removal spell, and like the first thing I would say, like, yeah, like heavy control decks maybe should play it, etc. And it it let the opponent gain life, so you wouldn't think that this effect is good, could be good in an aggro deck, but it's a removal for one mana. So what more? And it exiles, and like once you have 4 planes, a lot to ask for, but you should kill basically everything. With 5 on the battlefield, you can even exile Cavalier. So
yeah, I wonder whether humans will play this card, and if they do, whether it will alter their mana bases, because a classic humans mana base right now is 22 lands and only 12 planes. So I've played with humans the other day in testing, and it was kind of common for me to have like 5 lands and only 2 of them were planes or something like that. Like you do have 4 Mutavaults and then 2 of each Shepherd Dunes, a Ganjo, and Castle Ardenvale. I'm almost positive that the second a Ganjo will become a planes if you want to play this. And then I can see 1 Castle Ardenvale as well. But yeah, it's an interesting card for mono white decks in general, maybe mono white decks in modern as well. You're playing, I don't know, Devon Taxes, and you have this.
Or maybe mono white devotion strategies.
Or mono white devotion in Pioneer as well. Yeah. Next up, we have Feldon Ronom Excavator, which is a 2/2 haste for 1 and a red. It can't block, and when it's dealt damage, you exile that many cards from the top of your deck, and you may play 1 of them until the end of your next turn. Once again, an effect similar to Unlucky Witness. Or you have to choose 1 of them when you exile. Unlike Unlucky Witness, I think. I think Unlucky Witness you can pick and choose whenever you want, up until you actually cast 1 of them or play 1 of them. So it's another like my red deck wants another 2-drop with haste, and it's like a decent card in this category. Then we have Recruitment Officer. That is a very similar card to Feldon in my mono white decks. Want another 2-power 1 mana creature? I will play this. It's a human soldier, 1 mana to 1. And it has an activate ability for 4 mana. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them and put it into your hand. And the rest goes on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's basically a 1 mana 2/1 that you will activate 1 every, I don't know, 20 times you have it on the battlefield, and it will be okay then. But it's mostly.
That's what's better, this or Soldier Pantheon?
I think this is better.
Yeah, I also think so. Like
I think it's better.
You have, like it's better in like heavy attrition matchups like red black.
Yep.
Although maybe once you activate this ability, maybe it's not the best. So hard to say, but it's still better to have an option to search for something than not.
Yep. Then we have Loran's Escape, which is a 1 mana instant for white. Target creature or artifact gets hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Scry 1. Which is a card that I guess will be played in his heroic, if anything. But like, it's not better than the protection spell, God's Willing. It's just an extra copy of this effect if you want, like more or less this effect. because it doesn't let you push damage through without trample. So like it's just another 1-mana option for heroic. And finally, the last card on our list is Go for the Throat, which is a reprint from Mirrodin Besieged. It's 2-mana instant, 1 and black, and it kills target non-artifact creature, which I think will be a fairly okay card in the format, because you don't really have that good of a Doomblade spread in Pioneer, I think, so far. And this can actually kill more or less everything, aside from a bunch of artifact creatures, because every other Doomblade has some problems with it. Because like Power Word Kill can randomly kill a bunch of creatures, because it doesn't kill Dragon's Angel, Demon, or Devil, so it can't kill Mayhem Devil. It can't kill Kraken Drake is a Drake, but it can't kill Niv Mizzet. It can't kill like Baneslayer Angel or Lyra out of blue-white. It can't kill anything against the Angels deck that is not super popular, but some people are playing it. So overall, I think that Go for the Throat is a better removal spell than Power Word Kill, mostly because of Mayhem Devil.
The only downgrade is like red-white artifact-based deck with Michiko.
Yeah, but even then you can kill like a flipped Michiko with it.
Flipped Michiko or Ingenious Smith, so there are some targets.
Yeah, you have some targets, so yep. And yeah, that's about it.
We had to cut some cards.
We had like twice as much, and this video, once again, will be like hour and 10 minutes or whatever. But yeah, those are cards that are somewhat interesting from Brothers War for Modern and Pioneer. Overall, after talking about them for an hour and a change, I still stand by my opinion that this set is fairly unimpressive for Modern, but has a bunch of cards that will be solid in Pioneer.
Yeah.
And that's basically what I want from a standard legal set. To have 1 or 2 cards that are okay in Modern, and then a bunch of cards that freshen up a low-powered format or lower-powered format, which is Pioneer. Yeah, I like the set. I like those cards. I don't want to say I like the lore, because I'm not really interested in lore. I like that we omitted the dinosaur dragon engine thingy that you wanted to play in Dredge and you didn't notice. The one with Unearth that discards your hand and you draw 3. You had it on your list for Modern.
No, I didn't have it for Dredge. I had it for Unearth decks.
Oh, because it costs like 3 mana, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it's even better that we skipped that one. And any final impressions on Brothers War?
I feel that the 1 mana guy artifact, I still don't know his name.
Combat Courier?
Yes, the guy that will like
Haywire Mite, the insect. Okay.
Yeah, this insect will be insanely good in Modern, and it can see play in Pioneer.
I think you are overselling that, saying it will be insanely good.
Like
it will do its job very well.
Yeah, like much better than everything else we have in the format, in my opinion. So, like compared to in this slot, like
major oversell, I think. Major oversell. But yeah, it will be okay. It will be good at what it does. And
like the rest is like it's like a regular set. Like it's so cool to not get sets like Throne of Eldraine that will like break Modern in half, and like you can naturally see how like all these minor upgrades see some play in Modern, but they're not like destroying it completely. So that's cool.
Pretty cool.
In terms of Pioneer, I have some ideas. Like my biggest hope is making Jund or black-green Citadel deck better with the Diabolic Intent, because the deck was somewhat okay already, in my opinion, but it lacked some consistency with finding its key card. Now with Diabolic Intent, like 2, maybe 3 copies, I think it will be enough to make it better. We'll see.
All right, so that's all. Thanks so much for watching. As always, there are a bunch of links you can click down below. There's a link to our website, most importantly, and then our Twitter profiles, Twitch streams, and well, I guess that's it. Like, I just sold it like we have a bunch of other social medias, but we don't. And yep, we'll see you when we see you, which will be probably in 2 weeks, because next week is I will be preparing for RC, or rather the last chance in Sofia. And then after I'm back from Sofia, we might focus on Modern once again, because I will be done with Pioneer for
some time.
A couple of months. Today, Legacy announced the third round of their events, the GP-like events. It's called Legacy Magic Series, I think, or Magic Showdown, something like that. Branding doesn't matter, but they announced their events, and there will be one in Pioneer. The finals will be in Pioneer in Athens in June. So I have until June. Or if I want to play a PTQ that they have on Sunday, should I not make day 2? I think the Prague's PTQ is in Pioneer. But no matter what, I will be done with Pioneer for the next half a year competitively. And we'll be back to Modern, I think, next week or in 2 weeks, pretty conveniently for us, will mark 6 weeks since Yorion got banned. So I think we will just make our 6-week metagame update for the post Yorion ban Modern. And I will have to research how to call them, because they are not monthly anymore. I think you should use the word bi-quarterly, but apparently bi-quarterly can mean either half a quarter or every 2 quarters. Like you can say bi-weekly if you do something twice a week, or every 2 weeks, which is like super crazy to me. Like, why you don't have 2 different words for it?
I have an idea. How about yet another metagame?
Yet another. Okay, yet another is an option. Okay. Aside from that, I already said everything. Links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you when we see you. Take care and bye-bye.
See ya.